49ers Ultimate Report. This is John J., your 49ers reporter, opinionist, analyst, and die-hard fan. Welcome to my second video of the day. We have a really great guest on that I'm going to bring in just a moment. But before we jump into the video, I want to say thank you for those who are watching right now. I really appreciate you taking your time, hopping on the 49ers Ultimate Report, and watch some great 49ers news and content here on the 49ers Ultimate Report with this guy, John J. So thank you for those who are joining us. Really appreciate your support. But let's jump right in. So this is my second video of the day. I did a video just a few hours ago talking about Ahkello Witherspoon and DJ Reed, possibility that the Niners should look at them to return to the 49ers. So that's the video I uploaded earlier. So you should check it out and see if you guys enjoy the video. But let's bring in our guest. He's been here before. He was just on here just a few weeks ago during the week of the Cowboys. Let me give him a little quick introduction. So this guy, again, just like John J., from the city SF, San Francisco. He loves the 49ers just like I do. Let's bring in Shifty, 49ers Talk. What is up, man?
Yo, John, thanks for having me again. Dude, it's awesome to be back. I always love talking 49ers football. It's always a good time. And yeah, I'm stoked to talk about the offseason, what we're going to do. And yeah, I'm stoked.
I know it. Just as I said before, those who are watching right now, Shifty has been on this show before during the week when we were I think, going to play the Cowboys. But now he's back on the show, and he's going to be a regular guest in the offseason. So I'm very thrilled to have him on again because he knows his football just like I do. But before we jump into the show, let everybody know and remind everybody who you are again. What do you do so they can check out your YouTube channel? Let the fans know who you are.
Appreciate you, John. Yeah, so for me, look, born in San Francisco. I live in San Francisco, just like John. So we're the city boys. Yeah, I love making and talking 49er football. I do videos pretty consistently. And then one of my favorite things to do is to stream the live games. So whenever there's like a 49er game on, to stream that. But yeah, I try to put out 49ers content pretty consistently. Sometimes I'll do NFL related stuff, but if you do want to find me, just Shifty's 49ers Talk in YouTube. You'll see me there. And yeah, there we go. Easy.
Yeah. So if you have not checked out his channel yet, go type it in right now on YouTube. It's right there in the ticker down there. Shifty's 49er Talk as his YouTube channel. All right. So let's jump right in. Right now, feel free to leave comments in the chat. If you have questions, we'll have time for that. But let's start off with getting your thoughts on the 2021 season. I want to get your thoughts. I know I have a lot to say about this, but your overall thoughts on the 2021 season, and then also what were your thoughts of this playoff run? Did you think the Niners were going to go deep in the playoffs? So just the overall.
Yeah, man. It's well, I think the season was it was such an interesting season because I love how we started off, back-to-back games on the road. We won both games. Then week 3, of course, we lose eventually in heartbreaking fashion to the Packers on Sunday Night Football. But overall, once I think it was week maybe 8 or 9, I believe, and we lost to the Cardinals with Colt McCoy. And at that point, I was like, oh, man, the season is over. I hated the effort that I saw in that game. And I was thinking, man, this season, I think we're going to be done. But then the team responded really well. We won a whole bunch of games. And honestly, getting into the playoffs, I knew once we got into the playoffs, once we beat the Rams, that week 18 game, that we were the team that nobody wanted to face. Cowboys fans, you could tell before the matchup, they were like, oh, damn, we have to play the 49ers. They would have much rather played the Eagles or the Saints if the Saints got in. So, and then obviously we knocked off the Cowboys. Then I think Green Bay, when they saw they were playing us, they were like, oh, we got to play the 40. That was the mentality that a lot of teams had. So it's it's great to be that team that like other teams are like, oh, we're scared of this team. So, ultimately when it came to the playoffs, I think that look, we did pretty well. We got to the NFC Championship game. We were leading in that game for a lot of it, and unfortunately, look, we came up short. And there's a number of different reasons why, and we can talk about that. But look, I obviously wish we made the Super Bowl and wish we were talking about our preview for a matchup against Cincinnati because we beat them as well. But it's just I think this team is really, really close. And my hope and my general thought process is the fact that if we can bring everyone back next year, essentially, but then if Trey Lance can give like another dimension to the offense, and if it can like elevate the offense, then I don't see why we can't win the Super Bowl, especially when you think about it. And someone like brought this up that like, obviously, like it's the Rams and the Bengals in the Super Bowl. And against those teams this year, we were 3-1 against those teams. And of those 4 games, 3 of them were on the road. So I think we have to be feeling really good about ourselves. It's a bummer that we lost like Mike McDaniel and so on and so forth. But this team, we're really young. We're really talented. And if we can add a couple of guys in the offseason, and if Trey Lance can do what we think we know he can do, then I don't see why we can't win the Super Bowl or can't get to it,
Yeah, when the season started, there was so much hype on this team because we were going to have basically for the first time we were going to have fans in the stands. We were going to be more healthier. 2020 was not just a bad year for the 49ers. It was just bad in general for football and outside of football as well. So we started to have a little sense of, all right, maybe, 2020 was just a bad year. And then we started off the year and we played horrible the first 2 games. It was very bad performances. Like we did blow out the Lions in the final 5 minutes of the game. We allowed the Lions to come back, and that's why the game was much closer. Basically, Kyle Shanahan's face after that week 1, I said it's going to be some bad news. It's showing your coach like doesn't know what's going on. And I guess Philadelphia, we had a scare, but we did come back and win. Philadelphia was a young team, so we had no excuse. We had to win that game. So entering the stretch of the 4 games that we lost, man, all of the horrible feeling that I got from week 1, I was like, no, this cannot be. What's going on? Why are we losing? But then the Rams game was a tipping point where everything started to go well for us. It's just unfortunately we put ourselves in a deep hole when we were 3-5 after we played against the Cardinals. And luckily we made it to the playoffs. We clinched it on week 18. We beat the Cowboys, which was always a sweet feeling, being those sorry Cowboys. Then we beat the Packers in a very, very weird way. Aaron Rodgers in the offense was very awful. Both defense played really well, but it was all about special teams. And then we made it to the NFC Championship game. I'm still bitter about that. I'm still angry about that. But as time has passed, I understand that we had a great, great year. We should have been in the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that we're supposed to win the Super Bowl, but we should have been in the Super Bowl. And because we already knew the Bengals, I was thinking that this was going to be a year that, with all the turmoil, winning the Super Bowl, that's what I thought. But make it to the NFC Championship game. For the 49ers, like we've played in the most NFC Championship games since the game was established in the 70s. So we've had 17 opportunities. We won 7 out of those 17. And out of those 7, we won 5 Super Bowls. So when you look at the Niners, I do put that gold standard. I want them to succeed like that year in and year out. But just like you said, it was a good year. It was a fun year. So I'm very, very glad that we're able to turn the season around and we made it to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. It is it's one of those things where I just look back to, because it's around the time when we played the Cardinals at home, when Colt McCoy, and somehow they just demolished us that game. But when they came in and beat us, like on my stream and any videos I did like soon after that, I was like, well, yeah, I don't think we're going anywhere because I didn't see the effort. Some people, not me, but some people were saying around that time, it's like, do you have to get rid of Kyle Shanahan? Do you have to start over again? And I was always thinking that's too far. We don't need to do that. But I think all in all, like I had kind of at that point thought, hey, if we can sneak into the playoffs, we can be dangerous. And that's kind of what we were. I mean, it took us until overtime in week 18 to officially get into the playoffs. But I knew once we got in there, and here it kind of worked out in a way because we started getting healthy then, that we would be dangerous. And look, we knocked off the Cowboys, who they were, they had one of the best records in the NFL. We knocked off the Packers in Green Bay in the cold temperature, which is, that's their kind of football. But we went in there and knocked them off. Obviously, our offense was not good that game. Neither was Jimmy. But, hey, we made enough plays to make it happen. And against the Rams, obviously they ended up beating us. And I think overall they played better than us in that game. But it was a very close game. So, I mean, to think that we were that close to the Super Bowl, and if we had gotten to the Super Bowl, to think that the team we would face, we beat them in Cincinnati in overtime, that, overall, I think this is a really good team. And I think this team is, like, when you look at the last 3 years, like 2019, we go to the Super Bowl. I think all us Niner fans, like, we know that we probably should have won that game. Then last year, 2020 is obviously a weird year with like COVID, but not only that, I mean, just the amount of injuries we had was just insane. And it's almost at like a level never seen in the NFL before. But this year we kind of showed like, hey, Shanahan is a great coach. We have a lot of really talented players. And I think that as long as we can keep the core guys around us like this offseason and maybe add a couple of players in the draft, then I really don't see why not, with Trey Lance, that we can be a really dangerous team. And I think that it looks to me, from afar, like Seattle is in a bit of maybe they're in a bit of a transition period. The Cardinals, I mean, Kyler Murray's what I just saw, he's looking for $50 million a year or something crazy. And the Rams, even though they have a very talented team right now, we know that their players, they have a lot of players who are going to be free agents who they probably can't afford to bring back. Like, they're probably not going to be able to bring back Von Miller or Odell Beckham. So that Rams team, if they win the Super Bowl, on Sunday, I guess good for them. I'm rooting for the Bengals, but that team's going to be very different next year. So I think this division, if we can make some good moves in the free agency, good moves in the draft, and if we make the right moves, then I don't see why we can't be the number one team in the West.
Yeah, you brought up something very interesting before we end the segment and go to the next one, is that you look at our division. The Seattle Seahawks, they have a lot of questions. We don't know what's going to happen in the next probably 5 to 6 weeks from now. We do not know what's going to happen. Russell Wilson, is he going to stay or go? Is Pete Carroll going to stay or go? We do not know that team. They have a lot of issues on defense. And when I mean they have a lot of issues, just because they have Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams does not mean that they have a great defense. They have 2 talented players. They have a lot of their good players not named Bobby Wagner and Adams, who those guys will be free agents. They're probably going to ask, for money. I don't know if Seattle has any cap space. So you brought up something very interesting, but we'll see how that situation goes. You talk about the Arizona Cardinals, which is very interesting. Kyler Murray, one of the things that I was worried is that he probably wants to be paid because Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are in the $40 million range. And Kyler Murray has the same skill set. He's a really good quarterback. He's probably going to ask for money. Also, there's a lot of turmoil. What's going on with the Kyler Murray, just a little saga, which I think is just a little, the news, because there's nothing to talk about. So we don't know what's going to happen over there in that situation. Then you look at the Rams. They're in the Super Bowl right now. Congrats. Basically, everything has gone well for them. They've been very lucky that we were awful earlier in the year, that the division was awful earlier. It's imagine if Seattle and San Francisco were much better than the record said. It would have been a very different division. We don't know what's going to happen. They have Von Miller. I don't know if they're going to be able to sign him, and I don't know about Odell Beckham because he's a free agent. I found that out as well. They have so much dead money, and even though Rams fans can say, "Oh, we know how to navigate dead money, this, that, yada, yada," we do not know. But we do know about our team. It's a bright future. It's a bright future. In the next 3 to 4 years, the Niners are going to start to dominate that division because I do feel Trey Lance is going to be a really good quarterback. I'm not going to expect him to blow the league up in his first year, but I do think in his second year as a full-time starter, we'll see the real Trey Lance. So I wanted to just say that before we move on. And finally, we got some comments in the comment section. My boy David says it's Niners all offseason. And then he also said, we have a good core of players. We just need above average talent to help us get better. Thank you very much, David, for the comments. And let's move on to the next topic. Let's talk about the free agency because, the next thing is free agency. Looking at what's going to happen, and we're going to talk about the other tough questions later, but besides the normal questions about the quarterback and our free agency, what are the priorities that the 49ers have to prioritize in free agency?
That's a really good question, man. I think a lot of people will immediately look to the 49ers secondary, whether it's cornerback or safety. I think that personally, I would rather address those in the draft. I would like to bring in a veteran cornerback. Definitely not Josh Norman. We're not bringing him back. I was not a fan of Josh Norman at all. He had 1 or 2 good games with us, but other than that, he was a complete liability. But I think if we could bring in, so I did a video recently where I talked about people that I would like to bring in terms of the type of cornerback could be a Kevin King from Green Bay, a Sidney Jones who last season played with Seattle, Fabian Moreau with the Falcons, like one of these younger guys who's maybe mid-late 20s. They've just come off their rookie contract. They're relatively high draft picks, so they clearly have some talent and potential, but who maybe if they came into our scheme, they could show off and show like how good of a player they are. So when I think of a similarity, although different schemes, but back when we had like Jim Harbaugh and them, we brought in Carlos Rogers from Washington. And with Washington, he was a complete bust. I think he was a top 10 pick. But with the Niners back then, he was awesome. Like he made a bunch of plays and what have you. So I would like to bring in one of those guys as a depth piece. I mean, for me, I think our starting outside cornerbacks should be Emmanuel Mosley and Ambry Thomas. Thomas came on really strong at the end of the year. So we're not going to break the bank by any means in free agency with any player, any position. Anyone who thinks that, I think is, I think they're going to be disappointed come free agency. So what we got to find is those depth guys that should guys get hurt. Let's say if we can bring in like a solid cornerback who should Mosley miss a couple of games or whatever might happen, that we have someone who can come in and basically not blow the game. So I'm looking for one of those younger guys, again, like a Kevin King, a Sidney Jones, a Fabian Moreau, pretty high draft pick, who can come in, who still has potential, and maybe in our system they do really well. The other position, and I think a real weak point with the 49ers, and it's one of those things that I think that I heard you guys talk about maybe on the video earlier today or maybe last night, was like the special teams. So for me, someone who I would really like to value is wide receiver Braxton Barrios from the Jets. So when I think about him, he's like 27, 28 years old, but number 1 kick return, number 5 punt return, a really good slot receiver. When I think of Barrios, I think of, if you guys remember when we first brought in Jimmy G, how good Trent Taylor was. That is Braxton Barrios. But then Taylor got hurt, had injuries and whatnot. But I think if we bring in Barrios, he's one of those kind of smaller, shifty wide receivers that's kind of, really hard to match up with, and completely different guy to like a Jawan Jennings, who's much bigger and more physical. But if we can improve our special teams, get a good receiver for a decent price, I think that's what we should do. But overall, like when I'll see some like mock off seasons, or I'll see, people say, hey, we should sign this guy or that guy. And it's like, it's someone who's going to, we're not signing like a Chris Godwin. We're not signing like one of these top free agents. We just don't have the money for it because, look, we got to bring back so many players. So, if I had to sum it up, I would say, look, ideally we bring back as many of our own guys as we can. And if we can add a small piece here and there, that's what we do.
Yeah. I talked about this earlier. DJ Reed, he's a free agent. I don't know if Seattle is going to offer him a contract, but if Seattle does not offer him a contract, the Niners should, for whatever the reason, should offer him a contract, see what he wants to get. Now, he has performed really well against with the Seattle Seahawks, so I'm not saying he's going to be cheap, but I'm not saying he's going to get probably like J.C. Jackson, who's probably going to get between $15 and $20 million because he's the top free agent. So the thing that I look at, as you mentioned, when it comes, is the cornerback. We need to address the cornerback. And if we're not addressing the cornerback for whatever the reason, it really shows you the priority that they have. They don't value the cornerback. So we do have to look at a cheap option, like a cheap option, a quality cheap option. As I mentioned, we have 3 cornerbacks right now who are starter material. Yamador Lenore could replace K'Wan Williams. He's a nickel corner. Ambry Thomas, and you also have Emmanuel Mosley, but you still need to have depth. Josh Norbert's not coming back. I don't know about K'Wan if he's going to come back. We do not know about that stuff. For sure, Josh Norberts is not going to come back, so I don't really need to address that situation. But at the end of the day, when I look at the free agency, address the corner, and we must address the right side of the line because I do not know if Mike McGlinchey is the answer. Now, if they're willing to give him an extension, because if they don't give him an extension after 50-year option, you don't want to lose him. So there's 2 options. You extend him or you get rid of him and then address that side of the ball. But overall, sign as many players that we can, focus on Lincoln Tomlin, see what type of deal does he want. If he loves the team, if he values the team, he'll make sure he'll get paid, but gets a good deal for him. DJ Jones, the same thing, work with him. And then, of course, Azeez Al-Shaair, even though Azeez Al-Shaair, I found out he's not unrestricted, we still own the rights to him. So hopefully we're able to find a deal for him. If we can get those 3 guys in, then we can focus on everything else. But just like you said, inside, and then we look outside later.
Yeah, I 100% agree. For me, the two priorities who I'm bringing back, because as much and as great as it is to have like awesome receivers and all that, it's one of those old football cliches, but like you win in the trenches. So for me, you bring back Laken Tomlinson, you bring back DJ Jones. We got Javon Kinlaw coming back, who has been not necessarily underwhelming on the field, but he just hasn't been on the field enough. But if he comes back and he's a monster on the field, I think we could have maybe the best defensive line in football. After those 2 guys, I look at Arden Key, someone who really should come back because he came on so well later in the year, just getting after the pass, after the opposing quarterback. So like those 3 guys, if we bring them back, I really like what we're doing. Now, there are some players who I would like to bring back, but I don't think that a lot of Niner fans are I think it's a little bit divisive, but I would definitely bring back K'Wan. I would offer K'Wan Williams and Jaquiski Tartt basically the same deal that they got last year and be like, hey, if you guys for 1-year deals come back, obviously these guys are veterans. And then if we look to draft their replacements this year, that's what I would do, because even though, look, we know that Tartt had the big drop in the championship game, but overall, he was there for so many plays. We look at the Green Bay game before halftime when Rodgers hit Aaron Jones and Tartt was there to make the tackle. But there's so many, when I watch like games over again, when I watch the highlights of games, there's so many times where the other team has a pretty good play, but it's Tartt who's there to make the tackle. Does he cause a bunch of turnovers? No. And do we need to upgrade from him? Definitely. But I would bring him back just because he knows our defense. He knows where to be in the defense, and he's not going to give up necessarily the big play, but so we can get better for sure. But yeah, I think Tomlinson, Jones, and Key are the three guys we like absolutely have to prioritize. And then after that, for me personally, I would bring back K1 and Tart, but I know it's you can make an argument for why not.
So I want to say hello to my boy CG Ruthless Sports. He's in the house. What's up, man? He says, yo.
Good to see you,
David says, I like Jawan Jennings. I think we should bring him back. Trent Sherfield, but everyone is expendable. That's 100% true. My boy from Texas, out there in Texas, Damian Lee, my boy, says, I've been an ardent Key guy. Must bring him back, and DJ Jones are a must. He also says, we must stop bringing back injured players. We did that too much in the bulky days. Goodbye, Boaster and Verrett, and I agree with him. We need to look at these injured players and see can they stay healthy. So the Niners have a big task. David says, I thought we drafted Lenore to replace K1 at the nickel. Yes, he is a nickel corner. And then, of course, Crazy Juice is in the house. What's up, Crazy Juice? All right. Now we're going to go to some tough topics, but we have to answer them right now because we all know the direction of the 49ers. A lot of changes are going to happen. We've lost some coaches. We brought in a new coach. But as long as Jimmy Garoppolo is still on this team, we're going to talk about him. But this time, the question that everybody wants to know is, what is his trade value? So that's the first part of the question. And what team wants him? What team would want him? So I pose this question to you. What do you think Jimmy's trade value is, if he has any? And what team is desperate enough to give us the compensation picks that we need? So I want to get your thoughts on this question.
Sure. And that's, I think, the question on every 49ers fan's mind is what's a realistic compensation for Garoppolo? And for me, it comes down to there's always certain criteria that it comes down to when you want to trade a quarterback. And ideally, you want to trade a quarterback out of your conference so that you don't necessarily have to play them all the time. So there's three teams that I look at that I think Jimmy Garoppolo could very well be traded to. The first one to me is the Denver Broncos, because the Broncos, if you look at their roster, they have a bunch of weapons everywhere. Their defense isn't that bad. And their offensive line, could it use work? Sure. But if they brought in Garoppolo, I think that's a team that could win a bunch of games and go pretty far. So I would think that Denver, to me, is the most likely team that Garoppolo could get traded to. And it's, in general, I would say a second-round pick is what we would get back for Jimmy G. Of course, his stats aren't as good as a bunch of other quarterbacks, but at the end of the day, we all know that Jimmy Garoppolo wins games. Like, I will be the first person to say that Garoppolo throws some passes that leaves you completely scratching your head, but he wins games. And without a doubt, when you hear all of these players who come out and talk about what Garoppolo does for that team, it speaks volumes. And I think teams value that. So I look at Denver and I think they would be the most likely team. To me, the next team is probably going to be Pittsburgh. Roethlisberger retired, and they have the cap space, and so do Denver. So I think that's another team that is a playoff caliber team that needs a veteran quarterback who can win. So I think that's something that's very possible too. The last team is a team that's really just come onto the radar, and that would be the Miami Dolphins. They just hired Mike McDaniel. Garoppolo and McDaniel are very buddy-buddy. Of course, Garoppolo will know McDaniel's scheme better than basically anybody else. Tua is, although I like Tua, I don't know if he is necessarily the future of Miami, so I wouldn't be shocked. And Miami, of actually any team in the NFL, they actually have the most cap space, believe it or not. So picking up someone like Garoppolo wouldn't be a huge deal to them. Like, let's say if Miami traded for Garoppolo, they maybe, instead of like the 1 year for $25 million. Maybe they restructure a contract and they go, hey, 2 years, we'll pay you $15 million a year or whatever. And they have like a reasonable quarterback at the very least who's a very good backup, or else a guy who can win them games. But ultimately, I think Garoppolo will net us a second-round pick. I could see, and I heard someone throw the idea out that maybe it's a conditional second in 2023, which similar to the Carson Wentz trade, which could potentially move to a first-round pick. And that I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to either at all. But those are the three teams, that I would say are the most likely, and then what we would get in return for them. I mean, I know, and I see Tommy, I see what you're saying, that McDaniels on the phone call said, hey, Tua, I'm going to be here to mentor you and blah, blah, blah. But what else is he going to say? Tua's the only quarterback on the roster, so of course he's going to say all the things that he needs to say. But at the end of the day, when it comes to football, you have to win games. Is Tua the guy to do that? Maybe. But we know Jimmy can do that if he's healthy. So,
yeah. Before I catch up with all the comments, I wanted to pick the one that you said that Daniel said he's going to stick with them. At the end of the day, we do not know what's going to happen. We do not know what's going to happen yet. I do believe that they will stick with Tua because the organization that said they're sticking with Tua, and that's what hurt Flores being released. There's a lot of underlining parts, but I'm not going to even touch that. But they're sticking with Tua, so I'm not sure if he's going to go there. But I wanted to also address that. But I wanted to catch up because the chat has finally started to get some comments. So Crazy Jew says TJ Watt won Defensive Player of the Year. So CG was talking about Vic Fangio could return. I don't see that happening. And I will explain it in a moment. Tommy says Fangio met with Lynch doesn't mean anything. Yep. CG said consoling role again. Let me just catch up with all these comments. David says let's package Jimmy G, Dre Greenlaw in the trade for a good right guard, maybe a cornerback. Push Mosley Thomas to get some draft picks. That's a possibility. I will address that in a moment. Tommy says one different defensive philosophy. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't see that happening. CG says Ryans can pick up his brain for knowledge. Pick the brain. Okay, let's keep moving on. Let's make sure we get all the comments because I don't want to miss any. Yeah, with the new way, his defense, play calling. All right. Yep, I already talked about that. Ryan is scratching the surface. All right. David says, but D'Amico Ryans could use Vic Fangio's knowledge on third down defense. Again, I'm going to address that in a moment. All right. Tommy says, I've been crying in the piece. Okay. All right. Tommy says, maybe Banks takes a leap in 2022. Cool. All right. So I caught up with some of with all the comments. Before I answer the question, when Jim Harbaugh left, and a lot of people don't know this, it was a bad term. Bulky and York, nope, they did not have anything. So the entire staff also left. So I don't know if Vic Fangio wants to come back. I don't know if he still has any bad blood towards the ownership, but anything can happen. It's been like 7-8 seasons, so maybe time does change things, but I really don't see that happening. I do think D'Amico Ryans is a really good coach. I think that they will address all the needs that they will lose because our tight ends coach is now with McDaniels in Florida. I just heard before I came on that Wes Welker has left as well. So we'll see what they'll do with the coaching situation. But on the offensive side, Anthony Lynn is a really good choice. I think he's way better than McDaniels overall. And I think Kyle likes that. I think both of them, you could have like a co-coach situation where I think Anthony will basically do certain things that Kyle has not yet learned. And I think it'll be really good for him to learn and see a veteran coach who's been in the league for so many years give Kyle some pointers. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, this is my thoughts on the Jimmy Garoppolo. When it comes to his trade value, you basically put two at the maximum, not a first one, not a first round pick. Okay, second round, and you put a third round with conditional same year pick. So say in 2022, you give a third round, you give us a seventh or a sixth, give us some very low picks, so we can also use those to move up in the draft. As long as we get some compensation that is fair, no picks for next year. Basically, if you're going to give us all this year. Take the net loss for the following year. They'll figure something out in the near future. At the end of the day, that is the compensation that I think is fair. When it comes to the teams, Jimmy Garoppolo's market, one thing that I've started to realize, I don't think it's a very big market. I was listening to KMBR, and there's a guy from The Atlantic who basically said that the Steelers make the best sense, but at the same time, they're like, wait a second, he does have his injury history, his concerns. What if we go younger? What if we decide to go for one of these prospects? They can go that route, and a lot of teams are going to look at Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, before they even look at Jimmy Garoppolo. I do think Trubisky has a market. I do think Mariota has a market. So there's some quarterbacks that Jimmy also has to compete with. At the same time, we don't know what's going to happen in the Oakland in the Raiders situation because we don't know about Carr. If Carr's in the market, that's one less team. And then also, Mike Florio said, don't be surprised if Jimmy's market's so bad he stays with the team. So I am not making any predictions anymore. I'm starting to realize that they're going to wait to the final moments and take what they're able to get. So that's how I look at that situation when it comes to Jimmy. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts before we move on with this topic.
Yeah, I mean, well, number one, Tommy Huxley, urban liar, that made me laugh. That was funny. God, he was a disaster in Jacksonville. But when it comes to Garoppolo, I think if this were most years, I would 100% agree with you. But considering the quarterback draft class this year, so when you think about it last year, of course, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones. These are five guys who I think basically everybody was saying these are going to be five guys who will be taken in the top half of the first round. Whereas this year, the quarterback draft class is, I mean, you have Kenny Pickett, you have Matt Corral, you have Malik Willis, and these guys are, if you put them in last year's draft class, they'd probably be the sixth or seventh guy taken. I mean, I'm not like, I love the draft, but I haven't really watched much of these guys just yet. But that's just from my, just from what I've kind of read about. So I think that honestly, the fact that the quarterback draft class is not that great this year, like there's no quarterback who's like, he's going number one. And obviously the Jaguars don't need a quarterback. But there's no quarterback who's like a must-have guy. So to me, that actually increases Jimmy Garoppolo's trade value because when you have a team like the Steelers, when you have a team like, I think the Steelers are a perfect example, but even Denver, because like Denver, ever since Peyton Manning's retired, they've been looking for a guy. Whereas, and is Garoppolo the guy? I don't think he's like a franchise guy, but he's a guy who can clearly get you to the Super Bowl and, potentially win it. So, I mean, if I'm a fan of Denver and if I'm a fan of Pittsburgh, like for example, like Denver, they have a first round pick and I think they have 2 seconds. If I'm a Denver fan, if I say, hey, we give up our late second round pick, we get Garoppolo, we add a couple of guys we add a guy in the first round, early in the second round or whatever, and we get Garoppolo, that's a team that could really go far. So to me, I think if I'm the Niners, at the end of the day, look, the one thing that the Niners it's going to be a little bit of trouble with is I think a lot of people know that we kind of have to trade Garoppolo because of his cap hit. When like Florio says, oh, maybe Jimmy will come back. I mean, Garoppolo is going to make $25 million. So if we bring Jimmy back, that means that Lakin doesn't come back, that means that DJ Jones doesn't come back. That means that a bunch of other guys don't come back. So I think at the end of the day, it's either we trade Jimmy, we very much change the structure of that contract. But I do think that there is a team out there that will give a second round pick. I mean, for me, ideally, look, you trade him to the AFC so we don't really have to face him. But if we have to trade him to an NFC team, sure. I think there are teams that definitely need a quarterback in the NFC as well. But, and of course, I heard someone say on Twitter, and I'm not trying to spark a new huge debate or anything, but someone mentioned the whole Niners trade Jimmy to Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay gives the Niners the rights to Tom Brady and all that. And I thought that was kind of interesting, although I think it's incredibly unlikely. But I do think that Garoppolo should net us, at the very least, as you mentioned, a third-round pick. But I wouldn't be surprised if we got a second-round pick.
Yeah. And to basically finish off this topic, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but I've been watching NFL for as long as I can remember. And when you value something, you basically downplay it, and then you see who wants it. So, for an example, like Jared Goff going to the Detroit Lions, the Rams had to give up picks to let that contract go, let that quarterback go, and Detroit basically won, and basically they got Matthew Stafford. So that's how that trade happened. People forget, but there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to basically like say, you know what, Jimmy ain't the best, but he's not garbage. He's a big risk, and if they have a defense and a run game and an offensive line, they're like, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's just give them the picks that they want, and we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, a team is going to be so desperate for a quarterback that don't be surprised if on, like, say something like a weird draft day, like, you know what? We've missed our quarterback. Jimmy is still there for whatever the reason. It's just hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
A team's like, crap, we lost these quarterbacks, and this is not a good quarterback group. So they just like, hey, let's just give them, what they want, and then we get what we want. So let's just go one day at a time and see what happens. I do believe Jimmy during legal tamper day, the legal tamper day is we'll find out what team and the Niners have made an agreement, and then we'll find out 4 days later after the legal tamper the official details of everything. So that's my thoughts on that. So let's move on. Before we move on, we got some new questions in the chat. All right. Okay. All right. CG says, I think Pittsburgh makes more sense. Backwoods Bully is in the house. How are you doing, Backwoods Bully? He says, take anything we can get regardless of what conference they go. Yep. And I think those days are done. I want to say hello to Don Lovato. How are you doing, man? Thanks for hopping on. Let's see. And most of it is basketball questions. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about something that it's way too early to talk about, but the early expectations. And I have a lot to say about this topic when it comes to early expectations. What can we expect from Trey Lance? Because the question is he ready? Is he not ready? Are we going to bring in a veteran to continue to, have him develop? If Trey Lance is the final quarterback still standing after the draft, and he's the number one guy, he's number one, he's not number two. We did not bring no quarterbacks. We brought in maybe like a Tyrod Taylor type of like someone to be his backup, and he's the number one guy. Let's assume Trey Lance is quarterback number one. What are the expectations that 49er fans are going to want, but what are going to be real expectations about Trey Lance realistically?
Man, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it too. Before I answer that, I do want to say, for me, Tyrod Taylor is the guy that we need to bring in as the backup quarterback, assuming that Garoppolo is gone. Let's make that assumption. Tyrod Taylor is the guy that I want to bring in. We saw him on Hard Knocks when it was the Cleveland Browns when they drafted Baker. Like, Tyrod's the guy who's there at 5 a.m. He knows Anthony Lynn. Like, he's played for Anthony Lynn in Buffalo, with the Chargers as well. And we saw Tyrod Taylor play pretty well in Houston last season in a terrible situation in Houston. I mean, the Texans were awful. But so I think Tyrod is the guy that we should bring in to help, just to set the example of what a quarterback should be. Not that I think that Trey Lance doesn't know what it takes to be a quarterback in the NFL, but just to help him along. But to really answer your question, I think that we need to temper expectations, where I believe that early in the season of 2022, the 2022 season, that we will probably see a very heavy dose of the run game. I think we'll see potentially a lot more conservative play calling with a couple of splash plays thrown in. But I think that we want to set up Trey Lance for success. So, and to me, what that means is doing things where, like, a lot of times people say, well, let's say if you have like a young quarterback, it's like, well, you got to get the great offensive line and the weapons and blah, blah, blah. And like, every team wants that. But I mean, if you have a great team around him, like if you have like a defense like we do that doesn't give up a bunch of points, well, that takes a whole bunch of pressure off Lance, where he doesn't feel like he has to go out there. Maybe like Joe Burrow this year, who's like, he doesn't feel like he has to go out there. If I don't put up 30 plus points, then we're not winning the game. So, and Lance is not in that situation. So to me, I think, look, and I mentioned it earlier, Braxton Barrios at wide receiver, because he's such a fantastic weapon on special teams. If you can consistently get Trey Lance set up in good field position on kickoff returns, punt returns, so he doesn't always have to make crazy big plays. And we have awesome weapons. And so I'm really excited to see what Shanahan will do with them, just even going forward. I mean, you think about it, like having guys like Juszczyk and Kittle, and of course Debo. Like, Debo's like the best offensive weapon in the league, and then Ayuk and Jawan. And if we can bring in Barrios, who's a good slot guy too, I mean, I think overall Trey is coming into a great situation. Like, you compared Trey Lance's situation to like Jacksonville. Like, who do Jacksonville have? They have, their offensive line is kind of trash. They don't really have any weapons. Whereas Trey is set up for success. So I think expectations, it's going to be hard to say, because I do think that we will win a lot of games. Do I think that Trey is going to put up like almost 5,000 yards and blah, blah, blah? No. Do I think he's going to have bad games that will probably cost us the game? I think so. But overall, if he's putting us similar to Jimmy, if he's putting us into positions to win, and I think he brings another dimension with his legs, but I think he's going to do well. Do I think, again, he's not winning MVP or anything like that, like what Mahomes did his second year. But I think Lance is good enough to win us games. Like, when I look at the Houston game when we played the Texans, like the first half was pretty rough. Like, it was pretty rough. And I kind of see that as, but then he responded really well in the second half, and then we ended up just dominating the game. I could see a lot of those types of games next year where maybe we score 24 points on offense and give up 20. I think there could be a lot of close games, but Lance has a supporting cast around him. He has the talent, like we saw it at, like, North Dakota State. And of course he has the coaching. Like, when you look at Kyle Shanahan, Anthony Lynn, who, like you mentioned, is like, for me, I was such a huge fan of the Anthony Lynn hire. I was like stoked on that. And then we have a guy like Rich Scangarello, and hopefully he'll stick around, who's so good with quarterbacks that I think, like, we're going to get the most out of Trey. And yeah, I mean, I think we're a team that we're primed for success. I think our division's not going to be as good as it was like this season that we're, I guess, still technically in. And I think 17 games, I would expect maybe, like, it's hard to say because there's so much yet to happen, but I think Trey is for sure should lead us to the playoffs, barring any crazy injuries or anything. I think Trey is set up for success. So if he can't succeed here, then it wasn't meant to be. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, you have two things: the expectations of a quarterback. This is a quarterback-driven league. No one thought Patrick Mahomes was going to do what he did in the second season. No one thought, Josh Allen was going to have, a tough rookie year because he was the most highly coveted quarterback. That's why Buffalo traded up to get him. And you see when it comes to these quarterbacks is that fans put too much hype on these quarterbacks just because of who we've had watching for 4.5 seasons, Jimmy Garoppolo. There's not a ceiling, for any quarterback. If you could just play better than Jimmy Garoppolo, you're better than Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's the thing about Trey Lance. If you can play like Jimmy Garoppolo, I'll take that. I'll take Trey Lance as a Jimmy Garoppolo. Yards after the catch, able to bootleg, Elijah Mitchell. That's what the expectations that I want to see is that can he play like Jimmy Garoppolo? Because Kyle is going to handcuff him like he does to all his quarterbacks. He did it with Matt Ryan. He handcuffed him. The following year, MVP went to the Super Bowl. You go back to RG3, he handcuffed him. He let RG3 do the skills that he knows what to do. It didn't work out second year because he got hurt and he was never the same player. He made Ryan Hoyer really good in Cleveland, which is sad to say that Cleveland at that point, they were garbage. But he got off everything he was able to do. So I want this, Kyle. Develop your quarterbacks. Do what you've done. Trey Lance's first season, he's going to have the numbers like Jimmy Garoppolo. He's going to throw interceptions. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to do what quarterbacks do. But you're going to see the things that Jimmy could not do when it comes to Trey Lance. The expectation is very simple. The first half of the year, you basically handcuff them. You basically do the scripted plays. And then in the second half, you start letting them loose and do what Trey Lance knows how to do best. I agree with you. Trey Lance is not a 5,000-yard passer. He's not going to throw for like 40 or 50 touchdowns. Let's get that out of our head. That's not going to happen. If Elijah Mitchell can stay healthy for 17 games and we have good running back depth, we're going to run the football. We're going to run the football. We're going to throw the ball short to Debo, and Debo's going to run fast. We're going to throw the ball to Ayuk. He's going to go run fast. We're going to throw the ball to Kittle, and Kittle's going to tackle 3 defensive players and get 10 yards. That's how we're going to win football games with Lance, and that is what we should expect from Trey Lance. I wanted to read this from David. I think we'll see Trey Lance play good in the second half of the season, but we need to go 5-3 in the first 8 games at least. Don Lovato says, I don't know who's worse, Harbaugh or Shanahan. And then Niners, it's Niners sickness. What is up, Niners sickness? He says, hello, faithful. What's up, John Jay? Just stopping by to show some love. Appreciate Niners sickness as well. Any final thoughts from this topic before we move on?
Well, when I think about some of the comments there, I mean, who's worse, Harbaugh or Shanahan? I mean, I think they're both really good coaches. So if you say who's worse, you're still talking about a really good coaches. But as a like what God, I just forgot the username, but who said 5-3? And look, I think most teams would take 5-3. The majority of teams would take 5-3 after 8 games in the season. But look, there's so many moving parts that are left to happen. Like we don't know what's going to happen with regards to trades, free agency, the draft, with what our schedule is going to look like. So I'm kind of not at that point yet where I'm saying like we have to be at this record. But what I would say is like the first maybe like 5 or 6 games of the season that, yeah, I mean, I don't think that I would just temper expectations. I just don't think that Trey is not going to maybe come out and throw for 300 yards every game, which is maybe what some people expect when you draft a quarterback 3rd overall and you give up a whole bunch of picks for it. So, but at the end of the day, look, if he wins games, and I think that Trey is a guy like we saw against Houston, like we saw him do that even against the Cardinals last year at Arizona. Number one, I hated a lot of the play calls that Shanahan called in that game, but man, Trey made some throws that were just out of this world. Like I think it was like a 3rd and 3 or a 3rd and 4, and he hits Ayuk on like the edge of the field, and it was like, wow, how did he make that throw? And also we have to factor in too, like with regards to like even like looking back at this season, like Ayuk was not really a factor in the first 5-6 games, and I'd like to think that he was in Shanahan. Like Shanahan, obviously, for whatever reason, something was happening there behind the scenes. But I think Trey's in a great situation. I think he's going to do well. Like, is he going to be MVP? No, and I'm not expecting that. And I think a lot of fans, if any fan is expecting that, they need to be like, hey, let's settle down. But I think Trey's going to do well. And we have a great overall team. So having that and like maybe the pressure is somewhat taken off him where he doesn't feel like he has to go out and throw for 300 yards. When I was looking at just about like an hour ago, I was looking at there's a video on YouTube where it shows like every Trey Lance play of the regular season. And there's a couple of plays where I think it's great learning opportunities where it's like a 4th and 1. He tries to make like a 20-yard pass as opposed to the easy 5-yard pass, which would have picked up the first down. So, I think he did get some playing time in his rookie year. Of course, not that much, but I think he's set up really well for next year, and really stoked to see what he can do. And I think earlier you made a great point too about Matt Ryan. The first year that Shanahan was in Atlanta, what's funny is, and if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong here, because you might know better than me, but I believe that Shanahan's first year in Atlanta was actually the Falcons came to San Francisco and played at Levi Stadium and lost to the 49ers. And that was with Jim Tomsula as our head coach. And that was Shanahan as the offensive coordinator in Atlanta. So, but then we saw the very next year that Matt Ryan wins MVP and that Falcons offense is scary. So, I think every fan, let's give Lance a little bit, like some time. This offense is quite complex, but I'd like to think that Shanahan will make things as simple and easy for him as possible so he can make the plays without having to think too much. And, but yeah, I think Lance is going to do really well. He just, like, you see his personality, you see his demeanor, and to me, he screams franchise quarterback. So I couldn't be more excited for him.
All right, so we are going to basically get ready to do the final segment, but this time we're going to change it up because last time you were here, it was Cowboys week. So it was more about the football, the stuff. But this is the second time you've been on, and every time someone new is here for the first time, we play this game, and it's been modified. Basically, it's called the 2-minute drill, part 1 and then part 2 edition. So I don't know if you want to play this game, but it's going to be very fun, and the fans will get to know a little bit about you, and they'll get to know some of your fun answers as well. Are you ready to play this fun game?
Hell yeah, man. Let's do it. Let's go.
All right, so we're going to do the 2-minute drill part 1 edition. The guest is going to answer some very hard questions. I am just joking. It's some fun interactive questions. And the first part is 49ers related. So this should be very, very simple. And we're going to start off with the most easiest question. Right now, in the current roster right now, who is your favorite 49er player?
Ooh, God. There's so many to choose from. I am going to say because he was drafted by the 49ers, God, it's going to be a pretty cheesy answer, but I'm going to say Deebo Samuel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My answer, everyone already knows this because I've played this like a dozen times, like probably even more than a dozen times. Fred Warner, because Fred Warner's father follows me on YouTube, so I got to give his son, but his son a big prop. So Fred Warner Sr., if you're watching, your son's is my favorite player, but I like Fred Warner, so everyone knows this. The next question is, you've watched many 49er games in your career. You've seen many great players retire, or they played here for one or a couple of seasons. Your favorite former / retired 49er?
Wow. God, that's a tough one. Favorite 49er of all time. Jeez. I mean, I don't want to drag this answer out too long, but I mean, I'm very tempted to say like Montana, but I was a little bit too young to really witness what Montana did. Favorite 49er of all time. It's tough. I'm gonna go Frank Gore, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, my favorite player. Everyone already knows this. Former player / retire is Brian Young. I'm a huge Brian Young
Oh,
fan.
BY.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a huge Brian Young fan. I wish I was able to meet him. I know CG Ruthless has met him in person, so he basically got my bucket list before me. But yeah, I'm a big Brian Young fan. All right,
Love
next
BY.
question. Yes, next question. If you were in the NFL, say you were playing for any NFL team or even the 49ers, what position would you have wanted to play?
Ooh. I feel like safety. I'd like to play safety. Um, Speaking of like watching guys, like Ronnie Lott is someone that like in terms of highlights, I love watching. Um, but I think safety because I feel like whenever I play any kind of like flag football or anything like that, it's one of those things where I feel like I'm pretty good at like reading the quarterback's eyes and being able to maybe diagnose plays. But and then at the very least, either I can make plays like catching the ball, or else I can like I can like put my body on the line and lay a big hit or something. And I would say safety. I think that'd be a fun position to play.
Yeah, and it's so funny that that is my favorite secondary corner safety. So we agree on something. All right, so that's the first part of part 1 2-minute drill. So now we're gonna get ready for part 2 of the 2-minute drill, and now we're gonna get to some more personal questions. It's gonna get very real. You ready?
Let's do it. I'm down. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Part 2. Guest answer some very tough. I am just joking. Fun question. All right. We all get hungry. What is your favorite food to eat?
Ooh. That my favorite food. I mean, in general, I think I would probably have to say I'd probably say pizza because it's so versatile where you can put all kinds of different toppings on it. But if there was one thing, if I could go somewhere and get like a meal that's like San Francisco based, John, you might know this place. It's very close to where I live. It's called Tommy's Joint. It's Van Ness and Geary in San
Oh yeah,
Francisco,
I
and
know that area.
they do a barbecue brisket with potatoes and everything, and it's just like when you see it on a plate, it doesn't look like much, but it tastes awesome. So something like that is so like my parents are Irish, so I was brought up with my typical dinner would be potatoes, some kind of meat, and some vegetables, and that place does a great meal. So something
Yeah,
like that would be right up my alley.
yeah. I actually grew up there because I well not grew up there, but that area I know very well. I've worked there. I've lived there for a little bit. In the summertime because I have family everywhere. I have, of course, my family, and then of course foster families and other great people. So yeah, I know that area very very well. Yep, I know that area perfectly well. And of course, I'm also a big pizza guy myself. But the fans already know that from me. All right, let's move on. All right, food. We talked about food, but some people have sweet tooths and they love to eat desserts. First of all, are you a dessert person? If you are, what is your favorite
I have a
dessert?
major sweet tooth. I have a major sweet tooth. I need to brush my teeth like 3 times a day at least because I just eat so much candy and chocolate and stuff.
Tommy says, "What else is he gonna do with food, John J? Shoot hoops." Tommy's the funny man, and Tommy says, "Tommy joint is okay." I have issues pronouncing. Well, I don't know what that is, but I apologize, Tommy. All right. Anyway, let's move on. I'm not the biggest dessert person. Occasionally I'll have a donut or a little bit of a cupcake, but I'm not a big, dessert person. Not me. All right, let's move on. Uh, we love to watch television. We love to watch movies, entertainment. Favorite television show, favorite movie, or is there like a television genre or a movie genre? What do you like for entertainment?
Wow, good question, man. For TV shows, I mean, I grew up watching The Simpsons, and I think the first 10 to 15 years of The Simpsons were great. Beyond that, I would say The Sopranos. I do like quite a few HBO shows. So The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, I thought was really good. As for movies, I tend to kind of lean towards. I'm a big action movie kind of guy, so I would say if I had to choose a favorite movie, it would probably be Saving Private Ryan. I love those like old like military movies, so Saving Private Ryan would be up there. I have a poster back here for a movie called The Warriors, which I think is one of my favorite movies too. And I also like Tarantino, so I would probably say something along the lines of like Reservoir Dogs, I think is a great movie as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everyone knows, I'm more into those TV shows. Like, I've been watching Chicago, the PD, the police, and the medical. It's a really good show. I really like it. It does have a lot of factors. There's so many types of things, so many types of storylines that I really like. Things like that. I'm a big storyline person. As I mentioned, I love the anti-hero, like basically the anti-hero doing good things for whatever the reason. So those are my entertainment choices. So that's what I like to watch. And of course, we're going to finish off with this question. I love music. I'm going to assume you love music. What are your favorite musics or bands or just in general? What do you like in music?
Well, that's really good. So I'm glad you asked that. So like my typical genre that I would listen to would be very much like punk rock, pop punk. So bands that I like would be like Blink 182, Green Day. Um, there's a couple of bands, Bad Religion, Descendants, Pennywise, NoFX, Black Flag, Misfits, that kind of a lot of like pop punk rock stuff would be typically right up my alley. What about you, John?
Well, when I grew up, of course, you are from the city. I grew up in an area called Hunters Point in my childhood. It's a predominantly, black area, and I grew up listening to 70s soul, 80s, R&B, things like that growing up. So as a kid, that's what I grew up until I got into high school, where I started to listen to different types of genres. You talked about punk and all those other stuff. Like I learned so many genres. I was a huge like a social butterfly. I love hanging out with people. I got to know about rock and roll, punk, popular music, hip hop music, all of the type of music, even classical music, like opera and stuff. I got to explore everything, and I realized I love music in general. I do not discriminate when it comes to music. I love music, even if I have like one punk song, maybe because it just like something like it's I really like it, or maybe one rock song. When it comes to music, I go back to my childhood, 70s, 80s, R&B, gospel, that stuff growing up, soul music growing up. I go back to when I was younger, that music for whatever gives me a time when I was younger and reminding me. So I grew up like just in general that, but as I got older, I got to understand a lot of music in general. So I do not care what music I listen to. If it's good music, I'm gonna listen to. So those are the stuff that I grew up listening to, and like I said, I'm a big music person. When there's nothing on television, I put on the radio. For the young kids who don't know what a radio is, I put on the radio, or I'll go on my playlist on my iPod and listen to some of the music. I basically listen to a lot of music on my free time. I don't watch too much TV like I used to anymore. I'm a big music, so that's the stuff that I like to listen to.
So Jay, before we wrap up, I have a couple of questions for you, and I'm sure maybe some of your viewers will know the answers to this. But the first question would be, who is your favorite 49er player who always kind of flew under the radar? We're not talking like, like Bryant Young is a potential who I think should be a Hall of Famer, but someone who was always just kind of like maybe like an average guy, but for some reason that you always liked.
So I'm gonna be a little bit biased because I know his family. He went to my high school. Shante Spencer, who's from the city.
Oh yeah, he went to Pitt, I think, at school, and he number 36, right?
Yep. Also, another player, of course, because I know his family relatives. I never met him, but I watched him. He played in other teams, but when he was a 49er, Donald Strickland. So I do show a little bit of my bias towards the city. Those guys, were some guys. Another player that was not really talked about on the offensive side of the ball. Like when I grew up, when I was watching the tough years with Frank Gore, I really liked I forgot the name of the backup of Frank Gore's backup. You had Kendall Hunter, you had Glenn Coffey. Basically, like those running backs. I can't remember, but the running backs.
Kevin Barlow.
Yeah. It was just before the Harbaugh, like at the end of the Harbaugh era. I mean, before the Harbaugh started, so around the 2010s, 2011s. So I'm probably going to say, Hunter or Coffee, one of those guys. I like the run game behind Frank Gore because it was never spotlight. Because our run game was very, very fun to watch. Right behind Frank Gore, you could still see how good our run game was. So I wanted to spotlight those forgotten running backs. It's so sad that I cannot get the name on the spot. I'll probably have to look it up and I'll remember. But it'll probably be too good.
Yeah. It's not Anthony Dixon, is it?
That was another running back, Anthony Dixon. At the end of the day, like I said, like the Frank Gore running backs, in the very late 2000s, early in the Harbaugh era, from 2009 to like 2012, I want to spotlight those running backs. So, so that's what I wanted to. That's my answer. That's my answer.
For me, in terms of like the Niner players who were always like, who were like pretty good, but never like really exploded onto the scene. You talk about guys who are from San Francisco or the Bay Area. One guy who I liked, I think he was he played some linebacker, but primarily a special team guy, Larry Grant. I believe he actually went to City College in San Francisco and then went to Ohio State from there. The other guy who I really liked and who actually eventually came back to the 49ers was Brandon Lloyd, the wide receiver. He had some just insane catches for the 49ers. And during those really rough years, he was one of those guys who you would kind of want to tune in for. So because we had awful quarterbacks back, we had like rookie Alex Smith and Ken Dorsey and Cody Pickett and Tim Rattay and Trent Dilfer or whatever. But I thought Brandon Lloyd was someone who was just a lot of fun to watch. And so I thought those were kind of some of the guys that I liked a lot. I saw in the chat there, David says Derek Smith. Another linebacker who I thought was really cool. He had one great year was Brandon Moore, I think. Manny Lawson. Manny Lawson was someone who I thought would be a superstar. And he was around for a while. But yeah, those years were definitely a little lean, but yeah, so I just wanted to know that. And then I have one final question for yourself. Who is your favorite non-49er player? Never played for the Niners.
All right, so my favorite non-49er player. Well, I think I think the majority of 49er fans and even those in my chat, I talk about him because I am a good friend of a Cardinals fan, and I like Pat Tillman. Pat Tillman, of course, unfortunately, he lost his life, and he was a really good player, and he decided to say, you know what, I could get a lot of money from this organization, but he decided I'm going to turn the money down. I'm going to leave the team. I'm going to serve our country. no player or a random person that's doing well in life, they got a good job, everything's going well for them, decides, you know what, I'm throwing everything, I'm throwing all the money away to go serve our country. The character that he had for him to do that, to give up all the money and could continue to play football. And he also basically did something, serve the country of the United States. There's so many great players who are probably way better than him, but when you look at the character of what a person is, just in general, Pat Tillman should be looked up, and every NFL fan should say, hey, I'm not a Cardinals fan, but let's give Pat Tillman the respect, because what player in their organization is going to turn out all that money and, serve our country for the greater good? So that's an easy answer for me.
That's a great answer. And someone who definitely, I think that, as you said, that every, not only football fan, but, I think just everyone should admire what he did, to make that decision for the country is just, it's incredibly, it's something that you just have to look up to. For me, if I had to choose a player who, outside of the Niners, who I always really liked watching, and it's funny because it's also going to be a Cardinal, and he beat down on us a whole bunch of times, but I really, really like Larry Fitzgerald. I thought he was just a class act. Not one to be, not a diva, not what, just a player who I would have done. Man, I would have traded a ton to have a guy like Larry Fitzgerald be a 49er, but he was just awesome. Just a great player. He's so reliable, so consistent over the years, and played football the right way. And again, even though he had many games where he just whooped our butts, I am always a huge fan of Larry Fitzgerald. Just what a guy.
Well, thank you for the great questions. Yeah, I really appreciate it. But we are almost done with the show, and there was a bonus question, and I think it's perfect that the bonus question is the last question during the 2-minute drill. But I think this is probably the most easiest question. You don't really need to think. Promote yourself. Let everybody know where they can find you. If you have any social media platforms, your YouTube channel, let them know one last time who you are and where they can find you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So if you search Shifty's 49ers Talk on YouTube, I do videos pretty consistently. Usually I try to put out about 3 or 4 videos a week. Typically during the season, I will do live streams of the games, and suffice it to say that I am very passionate, we'll put it that way, during the games. There's a lot of funny reactions if you want a good laugh, but I'm a diehard 49er fan. Since I was born, my earliest memories are watching the 49ers as a little kid. And so if you're into 49ers content, and I do cover some other NFL content, but typically 49ers content, some videos, my thoughts on it. And then if you want a whole bunch of laughs while watching the games, feel free to check out the streams. Watch my previous streams of the games. They're on the channel. And it's a good time, and you'll see videos coming out consistently. I just put out a video about the talks of Brady coming to the Niners, maybe, which is not going to happen probably, and then also doing mock off seasons. I will also be covering a lot of the NFL draft too. So Shifty's 49ers Talk, just search it up on YouTube and you will see it there.
And thank you very much, man, for letting the fans know who you are, where they can find you. And before we end the show, as I mentioned, we do have a list of multiple people. We do have probably, I think, one person who has 5, times, appearance on this show. So hopefully in the near future, you'll start catching up. Maybe you'll be a regular guest, be part of the 49ers Ultimate Report, because it's about building a community. And I really am so glad that I found you and, got to watch your content, got to know you a little bit. And you've came on now twice on the show talking 49ers football. And so I want to say thank you very much again, as always. But But before we go, I want to say thank you to everyone in the chat. I appreciate all of your comments and questions, and also the great interactions you have with each other. But with that said, everybody, one last time, this guy right here is John Jay. The guy next to him, this is Shifty. Shifty 49er Talk. Check him out. Watch his stuff and help him grow so he can be also at the John Jay, 1K just like everybody else. But with that said, everybody, I'm John Jay, and this is the 49ers Ultimate Report. You guys have a good rest of your evening, wherever, or at nighttime, or wherever you are in the time zone. And you stay safe out there. Go Niners.